Thank you, Stacy. Thank you for having me on the show. I'm really excited to talk about it because I think is you hear about the Mediterranean diet all the time, and I think is ranked number one now as with the healthiest diets. But I think a lot of experts have left out parts of the diet which I think are very critical
Yeah.
to good health. And so that's why I want to talk about it today. So, if I ask you, what do you think of the Mediterranean diet? What is it about? What comes to mind? What are the first things that come to mind? Right? Mostly the foods that we eat and the foods we don't eat.
Yes.
And I think pretty much everybody talks about that. Matter of fact, one of the shows I was watching, the Blue Zones, which Ikaria, one of the Greek islands, is part of the Blue Zones. That's areas on Earth that people live long, healthy lives.
Yes.
They talk about the foods, and again, they left out some very important aspects of it, which are Mediterranean cultures overall don't eat breakfast.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's something nobody talks about. Matter of fact, one of the shows I was watching, they were talking about what people in Mediterranean culture eat for breakfast. What they talked about was what we ate on the weekends. A little background: I was actually born and raised on the Greek island, so I was raised on the Mediterranean diet. So I can talk. I've seen it firsthand. I was raised with it, so I really know it. I didn't just study. I want to say that to the audience. So I didn't just study Mediterranean diet, and so that's the first thing I want to talk about. Is like we did not eat breakfast. On the weekend, sometimes we ate something, but during the week, even as kids, my parents never forced us to eat something in the morning. Now, if we were hungry, we ate. If we were not hungry, we did not eat. Adults, on the other hand, I would say 90% of the time did not eat breakfast. That
Right.
we have some Greek coffee, which is basically the same thing as like close to espresso with no milk,
Mm-hmm.
and that's all they would have. And they would go to work. And the first thing they would eat, it would be at lunchtime. And somehow they survived till the lunchtime without eating breakfast. Because I keep hearing this thing about, oh, you got to eat breakfast for energy. Says who? I mean, who came up with that?
Right.
And that's, by the way, because when I took nutrition in school here in the States, one of the first things that I learned was breakfast is the most important meal of the day.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember actually I raised my hand in one of the classes and I said, well, when I lived in Greece, we never ate breakfast, and we're very healthy and thin.
Yeah.
And actually, that it's interesting. The teacher just dismissed me. Like it was like an exception or something, and she went on with the class, and
Mm-hmm.
that stuck with me. And I'm like, well, how come here they're teaching us that breakfast is the most important meal of the day, and yet in Greece nobody ate breakfast. And then
Right.
when I start looking at other healthy regions, like the blue zones, you notice the same thing.
Yeah.
Breakfast is not a main meal. Now, do they eat breakfast sometimes on the weekends? Yes, they do. I mean, but as generally speaking, breakfast isn't something that people eat.
Right.
And what I found out was the reason we believe that breakfast is the most important meal of the day is because of smart marketing.
Mm-hmm.
In marketing nowadays, you can convince basically people to believe whatever you want. If you
Right.
have a really good marketing team, I can get you to believe whatever you want.
Mm-hmm.
And that's how we start believing that breakfast is the most important meal of the day. And and to me, the benefits are tremendous because by going for 16 hours or longer without food, and by the way, by skipping breakfast, you get to go for at least 16 hours without eating. So let's say, typically people finish eating dinner by 8 o'clock, let's say,
Yeah.
and then if you eat the next day around 12, that's your 16 hours. Well, like similar to intermittent fasting in a sense, that's what we basically did,
Right.
and that was part of our culture. The benefits are tremendous. Number one, it makes your body more efficient in burning fat.
Mm-hmm.
Isn't that what we want?
Right.
It makes your body more efficient, uh, more sensitive to insulin,
Mm-hmm.
prevents diabetes. It makes your body more sensitive to leptin. That's the hormone that tells your brain that you're full. So
Yes.
by skipping breakfast and going for prolonged periods,
Mm-hmm.
your brain becomes more sensitive, which means you get fuller easier.
Yes.
And then you have the process called autophagy that starts taking place, which is a process the body gets rid of mutated and dysfunctional cells, which is the precursors to a lot of cancers.
Yeah.
And then also gets rid of misfolded proteins, which are the precursors to a lot of the mental diseases.
Yes.